Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asuk b'divrei Torah. V'arivna Adonai Eloheinu et divrei Toratcha b'finu v'yimcha beit Yisrael. V'niyeh anachnu v'tzeitzeinu v'tzeitzeimcha beit Yisrael kulanu yodei shemecha l'mdei Toratech l'shma. Baruch atah Adonai l'mei Torah l'amo Yisrael. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher b'chabanu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen.
Rami Bava Kamma said to Rav Krista, listen, I want you to do a favor for me. I've got a particular errand which I need you to do. I need you to perform a personal service for me. So what is that about? Is that he knew that Rav Krista wasn't going to like the particular answer in response from Rami Bava Kamma. And what he was saying to him is that if you accept you as a great Rav Krista doing a personal service for me, you're accepting my authority as your Rav. And if I'm telling you something that's very difficult to hear, you've got to give it some thought instead of having an automatic reaction. Because the automatic reaction would be as follows, is that since the person wasn't going to rent out their property anyway, and even though the other person benefited, at the end of the day, the person never lost because he wasn't intending to rent his property. So therefore, the Jewish approach in terms of hashkofa would be, listen, it never cost you anything. We're not sodomites here. We don't have to extract each and every benefit from somebody else if it's not hurting us or costing us. Let it go. So the reason why basically Rami Bava Kamma said you have to accept my the opinion of the me being your Rav here, is that at the end of the day, you're going to find the halacha difficult to swallow. Because there's a difference between the spirit of the law and the actual halacha of the law. So the spirit of the law is if you see a Jewish person that's suffering, and yes, he would have had the money to rent elsewhere, but it hasn't cost you anything, let it go. But the halacha of the law is as follows, is that if somebody else benefits financially and they stayed at you where they would have paid elsewhere, you are entitled to get the money back by law. The fact of it is you choose not to is a different issue. And why is this brought up in this particular Mishnah? Because if you have a look at the halacha, is we find that this particular issue from start to finish was brought up in Bava Basra, okay? And in Bava Basra, it was brought in 51a. That's the source. Guys, I'm getting a tremendous amount of background noise from you guys. I'm muting. If you have a question, unmute yourself. Okay. So we're saying in Bava Basra 50a, that's where it's there, but it's according to the halacha. Why is it brought in Bava Kamma in 20b1? And the entire reason is that we learned in the Mishnah in 19b3, it says if she benefited, she pays what she has benefited. Meaning that if you have a cow and you take the cow to the public domain and she eats 3,000 rands worth of my caviar, you don't have to reimburse me for 3,000 rands of caviar in the public domain because you're exempt for shame. However, your animal is now burping and full and has been satiated to the extent that she's not going to eat her next meal. So what you have to financially compensate me for is the equivalent of straw according to Rabbah and the equivalent of barley of 2/3 the value according to Rava of what her next meal would have come from. And what the halachic source of this is that of the renter is in Mishnah 19b3. If she benefited, she pays what she's benefited, which means as follows, is that if you would have paid to stay at my cottage, I didn't know you were there, or I never acknowledged a problem, and afterwards you turned around to me and said, well, you wouldn't have rented it out anyway, or you're not renting it out, and I turned around and said you financially benefited, because had you not stayed here, I know you wouldn't have been living under a bridge, because 2 years ago you were renting a cottage at this place, and last month you were renting a cottage at that place. Your lease came up, and while I was overseas in Israel, you used my place without my permission. So halachically, I can say if you would have paid elsewhere, you're entitled to pay me. And this is the source of the halacha. I just want you to know. But in the spirit of having mercy and avak klal Yisrael, if it's not costing me anything, the spirit of the law is to let it go. Okay, I just wanted to bring that up. Now we're going to the next session. Rava remarked on this proof, how spared from sickness and worry is the person whose master in heaven has helped him. For even though the circumstances of the inquiry is not analogous to the case of the Mishnah, Rav Chisda accepted the proof from him. Okay, this case of the Mishnah is one in which one benefits and this one loses. Whereas in the case of the inquiry, it's the one in which this one benefits and this one does not lose. So what are we saying here? We are saying very, very simply, the two cases are not analogous. Guys, why are they not analogous? Can you unmute yourselves and please answer me?
I don't know what the word analogous means.
In other words, I'm saying Rav Chami said to Rav Chisda, we learned that if she benefited, the owner of the animal must pay, okay? Because the animal benefited from its next meal. So if you benefited by staying in my cottage and you would have paid elsewhere to rent elsewhere, in that case, you pay because you saved on money. It's not like a case where you wouldn't have paid because you would have crashed in someone else's barn for free. But what we're saying here is that this case is not analogous, according to Rava, in the Mishnah we're learning. Why is it not analogous? Can anybody tell me? Please, guys, take a stab at it.
No, I'm sure I can. The one is, what's it called? So I've just gone a bit blank now. But
all right, I tell you what I want you to do, Gavin, Michael, any of you guys. I want you to state the case in the Mishnah first compared to this. When you state both, it'll be obvious to you. I want you guys just to think of it. Please. I mean, I can give it to you, but you guys are bright.
No, give it to me. Give it to me.
No, it's, guys, please. Michael, Gavin, Kevin, Arthur, please.
I've just gone a bit blank now.
Kevin back on speakerphone in case he comes up with an answer. So this is what I'm saying. Basically, Rav Chami says the following to Rav Chisda. He says, look, we learn from here that if somebody crashes at your place without your permission, and they would have paid rent elsewhere, even though you'd never had the place advertised for rent and you wouldn't have rented it out, they benefited, they would have paid elsewhere, they owe you the money, because we learned in 15b3 that if an animal benefits from its next meal, the owner pays the equivalent of that benefit of the next meal, even though it doesn't pay the full shame damages at all, but it pays what she benefited, the equivalent of the next meal. So that's the source. But why, according to Rava, is there a problem here with Rav Chami? Because the two are not analogous in the case in the Mishnah. Why is it not analogous? All right, guys, do you want me to give you a clue? Please not.
Because the animal, the cases are different. I mean, that's the only difference between the two.
What is the difference?
No, I'm just saying that the animal's not exercising free choice in doing this. I mean, whereas a person is, if they decide to
Okay, I think that's a good point, actually. It's not the point of the Mishnah, but I think it's actually a very valid point that Michael's making, is that it's not analogous, but we can say that Michael's point proves it as a kol v'chomer. Because if you have to pay, this is where Rav Chami is right. If you have to pay where your animal involuntarily without a brain eats, then a person that knew what they were doing and premeditatedly stayed at your place without paying you when they would have paid elsewhere, even more so they should pay. So it's proving that, Michael, you're correct. But the fundamental difference here is something else, and I need you guys to listen very carefully. when I have a store in the public domain and I'm selling caviar and your cow ate 3,000 rand at the my caviar and you want to come and give me the barley's worth of 30 rand for a next meal, I'm going to chase you out of my store with a cricket bat. I guarantee you. So I don't want to hear about that because you cost me 3,000 rands worth of damage. You might not be liable in the public domain for shame. I'm not going to be impressed. But in the case of my property in a barn, okay, I'm not going to rent it out. In other words, let's forget about the barn story. I'm in Israel. I'm using my a spare room as an office. So I'm not renting it out to anybody. It's my office away from home. The guy that's crashing there never damaged anything. Otherwise, halachically, he'd have to pay. He knew I went to Israel. He heard in the community. He snuck in through the cottage where my home office is, and he slept with a sleeping bag. He never damaged any property. I wasn't intending to rent the place out. I never lost revenue in any way, shape, or form. Okay? So how is this analogous according to Rava when you came to my store with your ox and it ate 3,000 rands worth of my caviar where you damaged and ate my 3,000 rand? You cost me 3,000 rand. Whereas in the case of the rented property when I was overseas, I wouldn't rent my office out for somebody to stay there. Again, he was in a sleeping bag. He never damaged my place. I wasn't going to lose any revenue. In that case, I lost nothing. And he benefited. In this case, let me finish, Michael, one sec. So in this case, while I was in Israel, I lost nothing and he benefited. Fine. In the case of the Mishnah, I lost 3,000 rands worth of caviar, for example, and the animal benefited. They're not analogous according to Rava. What were you going to say, Michael? Apologies.
I think the guy he's got such expensive caviar, he should take more care of it. I mean, it's the public domain.
I was using caviar to be
what's
melodramatic.
he using the public domain for? Oh.
Okay, when we say public domain, what we're talking about is can you imagine a shuk? I'm going to explain it to you now. If you go to a shuk in Israel, in Jerusalem, right, and you go to the stands, the guys outside, Arthur and I used to go on a Thursday night, they've got all their fish. Now, the guys there don't have caviar, but they do have smoked salmon and salmon in like a cool area outside. So if an animal's walking past and grazes at 373 rand for a kilogram of raw salmon, and smoked is about 750 rand of smoked salmon a kilogram. I'm not joking. I looked at it the other day at Moishi's. So at 700 rand a kilogram, this animal comes past and eats 3 kilograms worth of food. That's 1,500 rand of salmon at a shuk in Israel.
Sure.
Okay? It can happen in 2 seconds, believe me. I'm talking about a carnivorous animal. So I'm talking about a place we learned, and we're going to learn in the following Mishnah to come now, is that when an animal goes to the entrance, which is still considered the public domain. Are you with me? It's not inside the store. So I'm giving you a very real case in Jerusalem, like on a Thursday night with the markets, where an animal can eat 3 grams worth of smoked salmon in 2 seconds. A dog that's wolfing it down. So I'm caviar's a bit melodramatic. Smoked salmon. It's the price of heroin a gram. Okay.
Okay, now I can answer. Now that you said heroin, I know exactly what's going on.
Okay, good. Talk to me.
Okay, I can answer you. I can answer your question. So yes, 100% right by Michael there that it's got to do with free choice because the one's an animal, the one's a human. So with an animal, sorry, I couldn't remember everything because it was a bit dazed today. But so basically, an animal doesn't really know what it's doing. You know, it's more reactive. Whereby a person, is proactive. They know exactly what they're doing. So he knew that he was going to go stay in your flat, and he could have stayed. So he knew he was going to save for that month 6,000 shekels or whatever it costs to rent wherever you are, you know, in Israel. So he saved himself 6,000 rand. Whereby the animal.
So you're agreeing with Michael. Exactly. I agree with Michael. You agree with Michael. And that's it.
Well, I'm going a little bit more, maybe.
No, but I'm saying, even if you go,
Yeah, I agree with Michael 100%. 100%.
That's fine. So I agree with Michael, and Rav Chimi agrees with Michael. Why? Because the statement is very clear. If your animal that has no conscientiousness or no ability to withhold or its desires, and has no ability to premeditate you know what I'm saying, to plot and scheme or whatever, if you pay for your animal, which is not your direct damage, and you pay in that case, how much more so would you pay in a case where you premeditatedly took advantage to save money while the person was unaware? So we all agree with Michael here. That's not what I'm trying to say. What I'm trying to say is Rava is saying that the case is not analogous. Because, and I want you to hear this again, Gav, and Michael, and Kevin and Arthur. I'm not pointing anybody out.
No.
That in the case of the Mishnah of 19b3r, what I'm trying to say is, here your animal actually damaged and consumed the food worth thousands of rand, and you're giving a couple of rand back for a barley's worth, where there your animal actually damaged. But in this case, Rava is saying it's not analogous because the person stayed in your place without your permission, yes, but you weren't renting it out, so you never lost revenue. He stayed in a sleeping bag and he never damaged the place. Because if there's a case of damage, like the sleeping man with Mavi, you pay. You pay. So we're saying that the two cases are not analogous. That's what Rava says.
Yeah, good point, Joe. Yeah.
Because,
we should have got to that.
As Rava says, in the one case, one benefits and this one loses in the case of the Mishnah. But in this case of the renter does not lose because he had no intention of renting, and the one that benefits monetarily because he didn't pay us elsewhere, okay, benefits, but the other guy's not losing. And the Gemara adds, and Rami Bava Kamma, why does he consider the two cases analogous? Okay, so in other words, we're saying that obviously a great person, because you must know how great Rav Chisda was. He was a leader of the generation. If Rami Bava Kamma is saying that the two cases are analogous, there must be a very good reason. So why are they analogous? Guys, please think of something.
The benefit aspect.
Kevin,
because they both
sorry,
benefited.
Kevin was
because they benefited in some way, as you say. No.
That's not what I'm saying here. I'm saying that was Rava's question on Rav Chami. Rami Bava Kamma. That was his question, Rava. And what I'm saying is Rami Bava Kamma had a good reason for it. And he said the two cases are the same. They are the same. So do you know why? Do you have an idea? Can you take a guess? Or should I just tell you? I can tell you, guys.
Tell us.
All right. Rami Bava Kamma says as follows. Ordinarily, if one leaves his fruits in the public domain, he has in effect abandoned them. Now, let me just basically explain to you what it means. Actually, Kevin gave this answer the other day. Kevin, I never forgot it. You gave the answer. And what Kevin was mentioning is the case, yes, you did, I'll tell you. I don't forget when people come up with a chidush. Is Kevin said that there's a concept that if you give up on something, you have lost ownership of it. And that's actually in Bava Metzia. Okay. And in Bava Metzia, it basically says that if you give up on an article, another person can take possession of it. Let me give you an example. If you lost money in the public domain and you never lost money in your wallet, most people give up on finding it. If you lost money in a wallet in Jerusalem and it's got your ID and a contact number and a business card, in Jerusalem, most probably somebody would do the right thing and phone you and say, I found your wallet. In South Africa, you could kiss it goodbye. It's gone. It's gone. You will never see it again.
I think it's
okay? It could have your personal number, your ID. You will never see it again. But Jerusalem is different. They'll phone you and let you know. So therefore, that's a concept in Bava Metzia that you've let go of ownership. Now, the minute you let go of ownership and abandon it, he hasn't destroyed your stuff. You've let go of you've abandoned it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we're saying since the fruits left in the public domain would eventually have been destroyed anyway, the cow that ate them has not caused the owner any loss. That's according to Rashi. And Tosfot explains that the Gemara does not mean that the owner has actually physically abandoned the fruits prior to the cows eating them. Because if the owner actually abandoned them completely, then the cow's eaten ownerless fruits and the owner would not have to pay what she benefited either. He's saying here that the owner's paying back the barley's worth, which is benefiting. So if it's ownerless, we don't mean physically relinquishing ownership. Otherwise, you don't even pay the benefit portion. Rather, it means that without technically abandoning the fruits, the owner despairs of receiving full value for his fruits, since they will almost certainly be trampled and ruined to the point that are worthless than what she has benefited, or that the fruits, etc., deteriorate in the hot summer sun. Therefore, the amount that the cow's benefit exceeds what the owner of the fruit hoped to obtain for them. That constitutes money for which the cow's owner benefits, but where the owner of the fruits does not lose. And if the Mishnah rules that the cow's owner must pay the full benefit, then we see that the Mishnah requires payment in cases where one benefits, but this one does not lose. That's according to the Rashba. But Rava doesn't agree with this at all. Basically, Rava doesn't agree with Rami Bava Kamma because he says that one who leaves his fruit in the public domain has effectively abandoned them. He doesn't agree with that. Why? Because he says if somebody has a store in the middle of Jerusalem and they're selling their wares, like at a shop market, they haven't given up on it at all. I said, what are you talking about giving up on it? He's selling his wares. He hasn't given up on it at all. So therefore, he says the case is not analogous. That's what Rava says. He said the two are not alike. Okay, so we finished that. Any question before we go on? We can go on to another concept quickly. All right, does it make sense? Nod your head if you're new. Okay, good. We're going on to the next part. And I've got a new case for you. And I just want to share my screen and show you what this is. Okay, just give me 1 second, guys. Hang on. All right, guys, can you see here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So, Marco, I'll tell you what we're talking about here. We're talking about that Shimon has got a field and Reuven surrounding him all around with his fields, all around. And that basically Reuven wants privacy. So what does he do? Reuven creates walls to block off the public, but he's also not happy with Shimon. Why is he not happy with Shimon? It's because Reuven has got teenage boys. No, he's got, let's call it teenage girls. And Shimon has got teenage boys. So we learned this, that Reuven is not happy about the teenage boys looking at the teenage girls. They've been living around each other for quite a few years, and it was fine when they're all little kids, but now he wants his privacy. Now, I don't know if you remember, Arthur, we learned this in Bava Basra, in the beginning of Bava Basra, you and I in Israel.
Yeah.
You remember this? And what do you remember?
You're talking about the common shared domain? If they share
Yeah, so what we learned in Israel is as follows, is that you have a halachic obligation to ensure privacy, because there's something called visual trespassing. You need to respect your neighbors, where you can't you can't go on your roof and fix your DSTV when you know your neighbors are home, when they've got a swimming pool there and the girls are busy swimming, where there's no privacy. That's the bottom line. So basically, this is this particular case, right? Is that basically we want to resolve the inquiry about abandonment from another source. We learn in the Mishnah, if one's property surrounds the field of his neighbor on 3 sides, and the owner of the outer property fenced the inner properties on the first, second, and third sides, we do not obligate him, the owner of the inner field, to help defray the cost of the fences. So the Gemara infers, but would the outer fence on the fourth side as well, we would obligate the inner owner to contribute to the cost of the inner fences. Learn from this that where this one benefits and this one does not lose, he who benefits is obligated to pay. So what am I trying to say here? I want you to have a look at the picture. Now, can you see here, Shimon's walls are covered only on 3 sides. They're built by Reuven on 3 sides. Can you see that, guys? Please, I need you to take yourself off mic.
Yes, we can see it.
All right. So at that point, when Reuven has not built a 4th wall for Shimon, Shimon doesn't have to contribute to Reuven's wall. Are you with me? Do you know why? Because Shimon has got no privacy. Shimon here, that last wall was not built, and therefore Shimon is facing the public without any sort of protection. Had Reuven built 4 walls for Shimon, Shimon would have to contribute 50-50 to Reuven building the walls. And the reason being is that Shimon benefited by having his privacy now, as well as Reuven benefiting by having his privacy. But just because Reuven benefited by privacy doesn't mean that he built Shimon in the privacy from the public domain on that 4th empty wall standing here.
But Shimon
Michael?
Shimon wouldn't have built the wall at all. So why does he have to contribute?
So we're going to discuss this. Is because if Shimon receives a benefit, now Michael's got a good argument, and I'll tell you Michael's argument now, is that Shimon could turn around to Reuven if Reuven makes 4 walls and says, listen, Reuven, I never asked you to build my walls. My boys were quite happy looking at your girls. They were fine with it. I'm happy. We okay. You built the wall for your privacy. Why do I have to contribute to it? Am I correct, Michael? He could have that as a retort.
Yeah.
But what we're saying is we're learning a novelty. We're learning that even though Reuven does it without Shimon's permission, the minute he does the 4th wall, which protects Shimon's property against outsiders, because this gray area, can you see my mouse? Guys, can you see my mouse?
Yeah. I can see your mouse.
In that area, that's where the public can see into Reuven's property and Shimon. So as long as Reuven covers Shimon on all 4 walls, Shimon has himself benefited. And therefore we learn from this that when Shimon has benefited, he owes Reuven to contribute. We're not saying that he has to pay for the walls in entirety. He has to contribute 50%. Now, what we're also going to learn is that Shimon can't say anything, but what he can say is, I'm not happy with the material that you use to build the wall, because you used very expensive material, when in fact I would have been happy with thorn bushes and thorn thistles, which would have protected anybody looking in, and nobody would have come into my property because they would have taken the thorn out their back, because the place would have been full of thorn nettles. and they couldn't have seen in. So I don't approve of your material because your material was expensive. I could have built the wall for a fraction of the cost. Now, that is a legitimate argument, and we're going to deal with that next time. But in the meantime, know that if Reuven completes the fourth wall of Shimon, that Shimon has to contribute because Shimon has also gotten the benefit of privacy.
Yeah.
Okay.
100%.
Okay, great.
So,
Thanks, Dan.
sure. So what we're learning is as follows. Okay, I just want to add a bit of detail here. So basically, this is in Bava Basra 4b. The outer owner completed the fencing of his property, and he erected fences between his property and the inner one. So Reuven was the outer one, and he fenced in, right? But basically, Shimon's property, according to Rashi, doesn't benefit if Reuven only built 3 walls. And because he doesn't benefit Shimon, Shimon doesn't have to contribute 1 iota to Reuven. It's only if Reuven built the outer wall. Now, the only other case where it gets complicated is what happens if Reuven had the outer property. So if you can see where my mouse is here, what happens if that was not the public domain, but Shimon had a property, bam smack, a small holding, bam smack, in Reuven's big farm area. In other words, all around was covered by Reuven. What do you say there, guys?
No, then he's got more benefits, Shimon.
In what way?
No,
Well, sorry, the way you explain it, he's right. He's in Reuven's field completely, if I understand you correctly.
Yeah, so what I was saying before is where my mouse is here, I don't know if you can see if it's cordoned off, but basically there's 2 scenarios. The one is where Reuven's and Shimon's part of their property is exposed on a public road. And the other one is where Shimon's property is surrounded on at least 3 of the sides by Reuven's property. So if Reuven made the 4th wall where Shimon's property was separated from Reuven's, and he completed the 4th wall, which means it protected him from public viewing and public entry, Shimon would have to contribute. But now we're saying something different. We're saying what happens if Shimon had a little property within this huge farming area in the middle of Reuven's field. In other words, he had a place the size of Hazelwood, and Reuven had hectares and hectares of property. Are you with me? And Shimon had a small little house there. So what we're saying is Reuven never protected Shimon from the public view, nor from the public entry. So we're saying there that Shimon would still have to contribute, because it's possible that on the farm area that people could still gain entry to Shimon's place from Reuven's field, and that Shimon benefits from privacy of Reuven's family not seeing what Reuven's doing, and Reuven's benefits because their family's got privacy that they don't see, have Shimon's family looking on them. And because they both benefit, whether Shimon agrees to it or not, the minute the 4th wall is there, that ensures total privacy, Shimon has to contribute to the construction. The argument lies what happens if he's not happy with the construction material because he views it as too expensive. It's a separate argument. But the point of it is he still has to pay. We're going to discuss that principle separately. Because if it... So the note is as follows. Just give me 1 second, guys. He's saying, learn from this that the one who benefits and this one does not lose. In other words, the one who benefits is obligated to pay. So the Gemara rejects this proof. It says it's different because in the case of the one who fenced the 4th side as well, the inner owner can say to him, you cost me the cost of the additional fencing. So what it's saying is as follows, is that the fences along the outer perimeter would have been sufficient for Reuven, and he wouldn't have had to erect the 3 extra fences because of Shimon. So basically, Reuven has got a legitimate claim from Shimon to ask him to contribute, because he could have just done the outer perimeter to protect his property from the public. The only reason that Reuven built Shimon's other 3 walls is because to stop Shimon's family from staring into Reuven's property. Because that 4th wall that Reuven built would have been the wall to block off the farm from the public. Can you see what I'm saying, guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So what I'm saying is as follows. I just want to share that if we see Reuven here has got all that property, he would only build one wall, the one that was facing the street. He built one long wall across and separate his property. The 3 inner walls that's separating Shimon from Reuven, he's building because Shimon is in his way. So therefore, Shimon is entitled to contribute. But we're saying Shimon doesn't have to contribute because Shimon is being exposed on the 4th star. So of course, when Reuven does the 4th wall and really make sure Shimon is secure, of course then Shimon has the right to contribute, because Reuven didn't actually have to build the other 3 walls anyway if it wasn't for Shimon.